Hello, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. And today I have a very special guest here with me, Joseph. How are you? What's up?
Hello. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm all good. I'm all good. And Joseph, for me, it's a very pleasure to have him. Joseph, thanks for your time, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. We had a pre-podcast talk, and we were bouncing back and forth. So it's exciting to get this conversation going because I feel like we're going to get to some cool places. We have a few things planned out, but it's going to be really interesting. And I love talking about the mind. I love talking about psychology, and I know you're into that too. So it's going to be a wonderful conversation.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Sure. So, the introduction will be given by Joseph. As far as I know, the best part is Joseph got a podcast as well, and he got his own website where he publishes his podcast. It's humbleviewmedia.com, where he got his own, diversified content of podcasts. So,
Mm.
up to you, Joseph. Introduce yourself. People will podcast know you.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had an interesting story. So I'm over here in America, along the East Coast in a state called New Jersey. And I actually live just a few blocks from the beach. So I do have a beautiful location that I'm at right now. But my previous life was as a TV meteorologist. So what I did was I gave the weather forecasts every day to the news and to the public up in a different state called Michigan. And through that experience, though I enjoyed it, and I worked hard to get there, once I finally made the dream possible, I really achieved my childhood dream to be on TV and to be a meteorologist. Once I got there, I started noticing behind the scenes, it wasn't as amazing as I really thought it was. Behind the scenes, people weren't as happy as they projected out into the TV world. And then some of the stories I was noticing weren't really tailored towards the truth. They were trying to push an agenda. And when I started noticing some of these things in the background of the newsroom, I really wasn't feeling right. And I was at a decision to make. Do I, because I was comfortable, I was making money. Do I change my professional, I guess, my professional job and go towards something different that felt better with my heart? Or do I just stay in this business and kind of put my head down and not worry about my feelings and my heart and just make the money and live this life? And, I made that tough decision to get out of the business, to leave TV. And it was a really tough decision. But through that, I got to a dark place because I was like, hey, I've achieved everything I wanted to achieve. I've done what I wanted to do. I went to school like they taught me to go to school. I got my degree like they taught me to get my degree, and I'm still not happy. So what was missing? And what was missing was me. I never took me serious. I never really dove into myself, my psychology. I never really connected with my body. I never really meditated. I never really worried about some of the programs that I was building in myself. And once I made that switch, it really was powerful because then I got into psychology, then I got into coaching, and then I got into creating this platform as you just talked about with Humble You Media. And it's wonderful because now I could put some material out for others to start to question things and to start taking themselves serious. And after you start asking a few of those questions, and we'll get into it, life really does change for the best. So that's where I'm at right now. It's been a roller coaster of a ride the past 5, 6 years, but I'm pretty comfortable now, and things are doing really well.
Wow, awesome. Well, that's fabulous.
Mm,
That's really, some actually it's like coming out of the comfort zone is basically, it's more about that. Because
yeah,
if you're doing all good, if you're making money, you got experience. It's like you gotta lay back and you're like, hey, it's all cool. No, I'm not gonna change any field or career and things like that.
yeah,
But ultimately, you thought of your own self. So it's more about you personal transformation that actually leads for your professional transformation. That's the best
mm,
part about the story, and I love
mm,
that actually. That's good to see you, man. Perfect.
nice.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll be talking about today you for yourself. That's one of my favorite topics. I actually have I shared with you, my write up on that. So basically, it's one of my favorite topics, and I actually have already talked about emotional intelligence with linguistic programming. So yeah, looking forward to it. Let's start with the thing of basic self-awareness. So what is it, and how actually you, but when you realize that self-awareness too much important for you?
Self-awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah, self-awareness is, when people hear the word self-awareness, what it is it's consciousness. It's what you can, what you see. And sometimes what happens is people, when with their ego, is they built this conscious realm, this bubble of consciousness. This is their life, this is their reality. But what happens is sometimes people place the wrong labels on things, because what you put onto certain words or certain events, the amount that you give it and the amount of belief that you place onto it really is what's deciding of how that reality is going to play out. So you have to be really careful in how you build your conscious awareness, because if you're aware of something, so let me give you an example if I'm confusing you. Let's say you say that the word gold is bad, and you're raised and your parents told you gold's bad, and people are telling you gold's bad, and you or you tell yourself, you believe that gold's bad, then you're going to believe it when you see it that it's bad. But how true is that? It's really not that bad. So you have to really watch some of these labels and judgments that you place onto different objects, onto different people, onto different values. And it's really important as you build your conscious realm and your awareness, that you're building it in a filtered manner that isn't placing the wrong labels onto things, because that's what distorts reality. So it's really important as you build this ego and you build this consciousness and build this awareness, because consciousness and awareness are both one and the same, that you're building it in the right direction. Because a lot of people say that they're conscious and they're aware and they're smart, but it's really based off of their own subjective reality, their own subjective truths, their own subjective beliefs, and what I like to do is to get people to look towards the truth, like the objective truth with a capital T. And if you can get to those objective truths and really build your awareness off of that, and what that is a space like meditation. If you're sitting there and you're really meditated and you shut your thinking mind off and thoughts are coming up that are not triggered by your own conscious thinking, then it's going to be like, oh, there is some truth behind that. There's something that's in me that I'm noticing that I have to really put some time and effort into, because it's coming from a true place inside of me, and that's how you know if something's true. Now, some of the subjective things, what I like to do with clients is they'll say something, if I go to my boss and ask for a raise, he's going to think that I am being pushy. How true is that? You're just putting a judgment on it. You don't know. He might see you as somebody that's confident in their abilities. And he might give you that raise. So it's really it's really a dance. This awareness, because once you're aware of something, you have to make sure you're not putting the wrong labels, judgments, and beliefs on it. So it's a two-way little dance.
Yeah. Perfect. So
Hmm.
is it like same to the self-discovery thing, or is it different? Can you link these two? Do you think self-awareness is linked with self-discovery?
I think they're one and the same, because the more that you're aware, but it has to be that truthful awareness. You can't be subjectively putting your own judgments on things and thinking that that's the truth, because then you distort your reality. So what you want to do is you really want to make sure that you're putting the right labels on things. You're really aware of what's coming up, and if you can do that and start to be honest with yourself, start to be accepting of what's coming up, and not hiding some of those things or suppressing some of those things that are coming up, then you can really start to discover who you are, because who you are is both what you're conscious of and what you're unconscious of. And those unconscious or subconscious thoughts, those subconscious emotions, they come up, and that's truth. And if you can start accepting them and implementing them, or at least integrating them, then you get to that place that you just talked about, which is self-discovery. So if you're doing the right self-awareness, it will lead to a self-discovery. But that self-awareness is very important to make sure that you're doing that awareness with care, and you're not building some subjective fake reality into your life. You're really building something with elegance, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I believe it's more about that you mentioned, the topic is you for yourself. So I believe this self-awareness thing is like, it's digging yourself deep down inside, like I look into my own personality, and then I analyze my own personality. But what actually happens is you mentioned about the logical brain and emotional brain, that part. So what I usually happens here is we're so busy in our professional work, in our life, our daily activities and social media and things like that. That we usually pay very less attention to our emotional part. And it's like even if we got weekends, it's not totally to our emotional brain as well. Even if there is a weekend, maybe that will be dedicated to one of the other conscious activity that is basically pending from from weekends or some months. So ultimately, we don't usually give time to our emotional brain to think on and analyze the thing and actually analyze your own personality. And that's where the self-awareness thing jumps in, that you ultimately find your own self. And it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's not like that, it's just not like overnight it's gonna I'm gonna change. Like if I quote your example, as you mentioned, it's not just one day and you slept and the other day you were like, hey, I'm gonna be a psychologist, I'm gonna start podcasts and this through this job and things like that. That was a time taking process. you know
Mm.
you evaluate, you analyze, then you have a cause benefit analysis kind of thing. You find something that, hey, because if I see this, just like it's this media thing, it's more of an extrovert thing, like. And usually what people believe is that coaches, they tend to be more of an introvert,
Mm.
and they're like they want their own circle. They want their own company at first to meditate, to get relaxed, and then they come up with therapies and techniques to help other people.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but since you were into this personal transformation journey, you found out that, hey, I am with affiliated with one of the media channels, and supposedly it's more of an extrovert thing. But since you were aware about your own self, you found out that yes, there is some part of me that can get connected with people in such a way that you can help people. And
Mm.
that's how this journey from this media thing to this podcast thing, that comes to this long way. And it was supposedly it was never just a day or a week or a month's decision.
No, it takes years, and like you said, I love that you said it's a journey. And a lot of people, they think, oh, look at this guy. He's a life coach. He must live a beautiful life, or it must have been so nice. And it's really not. This self work is no joke. If it was easy, everyone would do it, and you wouldn't need many people talking about it. The hard part about this is you have to get to your darkness. You have to take yourself serious. You have to really evaluate the things that you've been suppressing your whole life. You have to dig
Yep.
into things that happened in the past that you don't even want to look at anymore. You have to really take yourself serious, and it's work. It's hard work. And think of it like a computer program, Let's say you have this computer program that you've been running and running and running, and it's been running the same program over and over for years, 20, 30, 40 years. And let's say you finally built that awareness that we're talking about. You finally have that awareness. Now you can start to make changes. But what happens is a lot of people, they get to this point of awareness. They're like, okay, I need to do X, Y, and Z so I can feel this way, or I could be this way, or I could start to grow this way. But what happens is once you start to do the work, you start to see, oh man, this hurts. This is painful. It's almost like building muscle. To grow, there has to be some pain. There's growing pains. And what you're doing really is, if you want to think of it almost like a metaphor, is you're going into your computer system and you're starting to make a few edits. And it's not used to these edits, so there's a little bit of resistance. It's just like when you start working out in the beginning, you can only do 1 or 2 push-ups. But if you keep going and you keep pushing it, you get to a point of 10 to 20 to 30, and then it's really easy. Your body starts to adapt. And that's the thing I
Yeah.
like to tell people is it's hard work, but you always can remember that those programs that you built, if you built them, you could change them. And it's just like the body. If you notice the body, if you start eating ice cream or cake every day, you're gonna grow and you're gonna be bigger, because that's how the body is. It adapts. So same way, with the mind, it adapts. If you're gonna feed it negative thoughts, if you're gonna suppress things, if you're not gonna be true to it, then it's gonna be distorted. And that's where neurosis builds. That's where different mental conditions build, and that's where the brain can be in a state of confusion. And then that's when people start to go towards drugs to feel better, or they go towards other nefarious activities to feel like they're alive. And all it really takes is what we've been talking about: self-awareness, self-acceptance, and really taking yourself serious.
Agreed, agreed. And I believe, Joseph, one more thing about this. It's as mentioned, for me, I actually wrote this. If honesty is the best policy, one has to be honest with your own self at first. Like what happens is that I know that there are some dark sides of me. I know there are some of the weaknesses that I may have, but ultimately what usually happens, I skip those. And once you're not embracing those things, and so I also mentioned about this, like I believe that vulnerability, as we talked, and I read this, is vulnerability usually people tag is as a bad thing. Vulnerability in itself is a negative word. And what I believe, it pushes you, and it basically opens multiple ways of creativity. Because you're in you're in an unrest condition, and so you gotta embrace this vulnerability. You gotta accept it, and then you find a solution, and then you define a pattern that, hey, I got this, but I have these baby steps to overcome this, and definitely this is how I'm gonna become. And again, from embracing it, from acknowledging it, from having a perception about it, then planning through baby steps, then implementing it, and then reaching out to a stage that you actually want to achieve. That's again, it's a tough process for sure. It's a tough process, and that's like it's like what you mentioned is it's like your brain muscles are actually they are actually in action, and it's a rigorous action. It's like it's same as going to a physical gym, and your mental reprogram is same as your mental gym, and you gotta rewire all the things that have been in your mind for years actually. And changing those, like we're talking about here some habits or professions and like personality. The biggest issue is people don't change their beliefs and point of views, and we are talking about here personality. That's another next level. But the first thing first is people find it hard, way too hard, to change their beliefs actually. And this happens in usually in our conversations. What happens is that if I'm gonna have a conversation with one of my friends, or say if I'm talking to you, and if I'm having we're talking about some specific topic, what usually happens is we don't listen. In our last call, we actually discussed this. That we are not listening anymore. And what happens is when I'm sitting with you and we are talking about, or maybe we are having an argument about some specific topic, what I actually have, it's implied in my mind that since I'm having this point of view, and whatever point of view Joseph gonna have, I'm gonna counter that. So I haven't yet started talking. I haven't yet started the discussion, but I have this assumption in my mind. Yet, my point of view and my belief is the best, and no matter what you're gonna say, I'm gonna skip that. And this is just common point of view thing. And we like with respect to your journey and your story, it's pure hard work and rigorous transformation of your mind, through which you can change your habits and ultimately your personality. So
Well, what happens is,
yeah,
well, what I'm going to say is what you're saying is you're really talking about that ego. And that's what happens is people attach to the ego. And instead of attaching to who they truly are, and I think we'll get into that, is that middle space of the conscious and unconsciousness. That's where the self is. But what happens is people get into this ego and they become egotistical. And it's really tough for them to, one, hear what other people have to say because they don't care what other people have to say, because they just care about what they have to say. They just care about their own subjective reality. So why would you want to? And then the other thing is people like to play teams. So think of a sport. You root for a team and it's like, that's my team. Your team stinks. And that's sort of what people get into. It's almost like a little bit of a narcissism with their ego, is they feel like their ego's the best, and they put themselves almost like a pet on a pedestal and put themselves above other people. And that's just not good, because you're limiting anything. You're limiting other ideas that could possibly help you. You're really limiting your life living in that space. So what I like to say is to take yourself and take your ego and kind of humble yourself to a good point, to a point where you can accept some of those dark traits about yourself, or you can, really implement that wholeness that I like to talk about into life.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So, we be talking about mainly the conscious things, and there are many other conscious parts, and conscious factors that actually helps us in self-awareness and self-discovery. What do you think? What's the role of unconscious in this?
Yeah. So unconscious is basically, you hear people talk about, you have the space of unlimited potential, or you could achieve any dream, or, where is everything coming from? It's coming from the unconscious. People call it the void. People call it the all. People call it the universal energy. You can call it whatever you want, but think about yourself as a child. What you did as a child was you made order to all the chaos that's going on around you. Think about the brain. The brain doesn't see the color red and say that's the color red, or it doesn't see, blood and think, oh, that's evil blood. Or we're putting our own judgments, sort of what we talked about earlier. We're putting our own beliefs, our own judgments, our own values onto these things. The brain doesn't know what's right or wrong. So what the brain knows is what an object is, how it looks, how it's shaped. It uses the sensory inputs to put some information on different things and label it. So what you have to do is remember that when you're a child, what you're doing is you're taking all of this craziness around us and you're defining it so you can create a conscious bubble, so you can make some sense out of this disorder. And that disorder really is the unconscious. So what happens is, like we've been saying, you get a little bit too egotistical. You lose that connection with the unconscious. And what that space is for now is just to suppress things, just to shove stuff down, suppress thoughts or things you don't want to take care of or things you don't want to think about. And what happens is it builds in the unconscious, and at some point it comes and it reveals itself. And it could scare the living daylights out of you, if you're not ready for it. So what I like to tell people is to really be humble and to think about those triggers that come up, or think about a moment where you have an emotional outburst. And it's like, why did you have that outburst? What's inside of you that you really haven't taken care of, so that doesn't happen again, and that's where the power of getting towards the unconscious is. And then there's also the power of, think about, when you take a walk, or even if you're sitting around and you have thoughts that arise, like really good thoughts or really good ideas. It's like, oh, that's the unconscious, because you didn't think about it with your thinking mind. It just came out from somewhere, So it's almost like this game, and I love playing with the unconscious because you could really enhance it. The better you treat yourself, the more you can kind of get into the zone, or you can get into the present moment, or get into the flow zone, the more that the unconscious starts to speak to you. So it's very important to be both conscious and unconscious. And I like to say that point in the middle, kind of playing off of what Jung talks about, Carl Jung, that point in the middle really is the self. And what you're doing is creating order from the unconscious chaos.
Yep. And you mentioned about that because I read this about Bruce Lipton. He mentioned in his book, Biology of Belief. He said that show me a person, show me a child till age 7, and I'll show you a man. I'll give you the entire lifespan of a man. And for 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 me, what I think about this, it's like like what you mentioned about unconscious thing is, it's more about that those activities are so much engraved in our back of the mind that we are literally unaware. Then someday sometimes someone the other person highlights, hey, but when you're with that person specifically, you glue, you glitter. your eyes glitter, you smile like someone. And on the other hand, it's like, when you go to that group of people, you always, you're trying to skip having company of those people and things like that. And same happens with, our energy system. So I believe it's a very common forte for this, pay attention to the people with whom your energy gets negative.
Mm, mm.
And
And yeah.
that that that's I believe that's true, because what happens with respect to, again, we mentioned about the emotional brain. So what happens is, when as you also mentioned about the meditation thing, and I'm relaxed, I'm sitting down here, and I'm meditating, or I have done just did meditation. So when I'm talking, and the emotional part of the brain is actually highly active, and that's where the environment, ultimately it also supports me gaining the positive energy. And it also happens with artists as well. So if I'm a guitarist, the room where, let's say, I was beaten by my father or my brother or my friend, is never gonna be the room for my arts. I'm not gonna produce any tune sitting in that room where my unconscious, was humiliated.
Yeah.
Rather, I'll sit down on a roadside, on a beach where people are chatting. I don't know anyone, but still, I'll be able to produce a tune.
Mm.
And that's how it works. Because unconscious, it works on the, it works for pleasure, and
Yeah.
ultimately it's for survival. So if I get a threat from something or some place or some energies, no, I'm gonna skip those. For sure,
Mm.
I'm gonna skip those.
And that's powerful to be aware of energies, and I wanted to get to that too. We're talking a lot about the mind, but what really it is trying to get a sense of our energy. And I feel like the energy is really what the spirit is, that all of these people have been talking about for centuries. The spirit inside is really our energy inside, and if you could start to really place your attention and awareness towards it, then you can notice what's kind of triggering you away from that equilibrium space, that space of balance or space of centering. And like you said, you can notice just by being in a room, like some people do their work from home, and they're saying, like, I'm struggling to do this work from home. It's just so hard. And what it is the brain in their bedroom thinks it's bedtime, and it's so used to the bedroom being bedtime. When they go to do some hard work and creativity there, the brain's like, no, 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 you're not. What are you doing? It's sleep time, and it's like this internal battle. It's because the brain really, it's hyper aware of everything around us, and it takes all these different sorts of information, whether it's visual, whether it's sounds, whether it's smells, and it puts you in a space, so it's used to things because it wants to keep you safe, and you got to play with the brain a little bit. And like you said, sometimes you have to go out to get those creative juices flowing. For me, I go to the beach, and I'm writing a book, so I go to the beach because I'm able to really think and let go. And I've noticed such a huge difference just by changing scenery, and the only way you would know that is to really become aware of yourself and to really take yourself serious, so you can know, oh, my energies don't feel right in this room, maybe I need to go somewhere else. So yeah, that kind of plays into what we're talking about with the awareness, with the self-discovery, and then just becoming conscious of these unconscious things that our brains are attached to. We don't notice that our brain can't work at its optimal level because it's putting its own category on the environment that we're in. Like you said, around your family, trying to create music, you just couldn't get into that creative juice. But if you can get aware of your unconscious triggers and start to say, oh, maybe I need to go somewhere else to create music, maybe it's the environment that's limiting me, then that's the power of integrating the unconscious to the conscious.
True that. And I believe for me, with respect to this energy thing, so this is my common area where I usually make podcasts. So, let me tell you what happens when I come to this room. Actually, this is the one seat or the other seat, the other background. These are the two seats that I always choose.
Mm.
Always. So there are many seats. There are many seats in this room. But since I'm a big podcast of these, seats, so every time, literally every time I come to this room, I'm the only one who chooses from one of these two seats.
And
And
it
then
might sound goofy. It might sound goofy, but it's not goofy. Like it really is. Like it's knowing how the brain works. You know, that's your podcast seat, and that puts you in the
it,
position to
it,
be a good podcast host.
it's highly unconscious. Literally, it's highly unconscious. Like at times, my family goes like, "Hey, you're sitting here," and I'm like, "It's my seat." I Anyway, so
Uh,
okay, awesome.
yeah.
So we talked about self awareness, self discovery. We relate all of these to the unconscious thing.
Hmm.
And since getting aware about your own self, having your own identity, connecting all of these to the unconscious, that brings me to one of the most powerful thing about self. That is self love. Let's
Mm,
just talk about.
yeah. Let's talk about self love and the thing
So
about. Oh, if you have a question, go ahead.
yeah. So definitely we will start with the basic of self-love, but definitely ultimately I want you to take it a bit deep down to the psychology of self.
Hmm. So I guess the beginning phases of self love. Self love's tough because it's so easy to say, I love myself. But who truly loves himself? Think about the thoughts that come up that you think about yourself throughout the day, and think about some of these emotions that you think towards yourself. And then think about some of the things you do to really not enhance yourself. And imagine some of these thoughts that you have for yourself. Imagine you saying it to your best friends or your mother or your father, you know? Some of us would be arrested for the things that we say to ourselves or do to ourselves if we did it to someone else. We are so hard on ourselves. And what self-love is, it is embracing yourself and giving yourself a little hug here and there and taking a walk with yourself and doing a meditation and being calm and maybe getting a massage or maybe, doing a breathing exercise or taking a hot bath and just relaxing. That's all great, and that's part of self-love. That's like the self-care part of self-love. But what truly self-love is think about how a mother loves their child. They don't sit there and try to, especially the good mothers, they don't sit there and try to torture the kid or tell them how terrible they are or, you're awful, you can't do this, you're not good enough. What they do is they support them. They really push them along, and they love whether it's good or bad. There's nothing attached to it. There's no strings attached to this love. And that's true love. To be able to love yourself in that sense, to love yourself like a mother loves their child, like a true mother and child relationship, to love yourself where you'll be okay to take on the bad moments that arise and not hide from them, because that's not love for yourself if you're suppressing things or you're hiding from things that you need to take care of. And it would be like a mother seeing that their child needs help and just leaving them off on their own to try to figure it out. And that's sort of what we do to ourselves. And what we need to do is take care of ourselves like a mother would, even the bad moments. Just handle them with care, integrate them with care. Or if there are bad moments that happen, let's say you say something nasty to someone and that moment's kind of holding you back, you need to be able to get back to that moment and right the wrongs in a sense. And that's what self-love is. So it is good to have the self-care aspect of it, but you also have to have that. How would a mother treat their child? Like when a child does something wrong, they don't sit there and beat them up over it. Like a true mother tries to teach them a lesson out of it. And I love to say there's either a good moment or there's a lesson. There's no bad moments. Every mistake, everything that happens in a negative tone can be tailored towards wisdom and then applied into the conscious realm for growth. So yeah, that's the way I see self-love.
Awesome. And for me, that you mentioned, we are too hard on ourselves. That actually reminds me of one of the lines I mentioned that we gotta push ourselves. You can push yourself, but hey, wait, be show some ease and show some mercy on your soul.
Mm.
Ultimately, it's your unconscious. So
And
what
then
happens is that yeah.
no, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is that when we become our self critique, we go too hard on us. We go too hard on us, and it's like uh, ultimately and indirectly we are killing our own self, and that kills our creativity, that kills our like self-image, the one I have for my own self. When I'm getting too hard on my own self, I actually am questioning every single skill and trait, an attribute of my own self. So ultimately, what I'm doing is it's like indirectly I'm killing my own personality,
Mm.
and that's
Mm.
brutal. It's totally brutal. That's actually the ultimate opposite of what self-love is. Self-love is, what you mentioned, is like embracing your own self.
Mm.
And it's just a query. I want to deep down on this topic as well. But it comes in my mind that, do you think, is it mixed up, or people usually take it as a myth, that self love, is it being selfish? Like, if I love myself, is it like I'm selfish?
That's so funny you asked that because I've actually just started working on a project. I don't know if I'm going to do a post on Instagram or if I'm going to make a video out of it, but it's about being, I guess, it's about self love, but not being narcissistic with it, And there is that fine line of loving yourself, but not putting yourself on that pedestal, And it's really talking about, the ego, how we talked about the ego. And if you love your ego, if that's your self love, is you love your ego, which means you want attention, which means you want to be number one. You want to be always right. You want to be the best. You want to have the most money. You want to make people jealous. If you're loving that self, and that's a problem. That's an issue. That's that attachment to the ego. That's that climb away from the unconscious. The second self love is actual that self point that we've been talking about, that middle point of the conscious and unconscious. And if you can love that middle point of yourself, which means you love some of your darkness, not in a nasty way, but in a way like a parent does, because that some of that darkness or some of that the mistakes that you make, that they're going to lead you towards growth. And I like to tell people, think about what really gets you to change, or what really gets somebody to want to grow. What that is an impactful moment. It's a tough moment that shakes up your world, and it shakes up your ego, and it detaches you from that reality that you were living, and it gets you at a more vulnerable space. And that's when true growth starts to occur, because you're humbled to that point of the self, that true self. So self-love, there's ego love and there's self-love. And what I really want to get people to is that holistic self-love, instead of loving this ego that it can get ugly. And I'm sure you've seen it. Even some celebrities, you see how the ego can create a black heart, in a sense.
Exactly. True. Exactly. And one more thing about it, that this thing, those very petty and minor things that you show yourself as a respect, because self love is related to those self care and your self respect.
Mm,
And i- with everyday activities, how actually I'm gonna behave with my own self, how actually I'm gonna take care of my own self, that shows how much I love myself.
mm,
And this ultimately keeps me to a next level of calmness, positivity, and like gaining multiple things like people can't even imagine. So what happens is that when a person when a person is good in self love, he or she knows the strengths they have, the strengths they got, and like again, since you're my guest, and we've been talking about your story. You knew about your own self. You
mm,
knew that this thing I have achieved there, but no, it's not meant for me as of now. You know, I'm good with it. I've done it. I got finances, everything, but
mm,
this thing is not for me for now.
mm,
And then you find out, no, I'm gonna switch it, and I'm gonna change. Since I love myself, I'm gonna put myself, in this dark hole, and ultimately I'm gonna rise, and I'm gonna glow. And
mm.
that's the best example, I believe, that again related to your story. It's very inspiring for sure. And ultimately, it's all about self-love. If you would have never thought of loving yourself, I believe you were still doing the same job.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-love, it's powerful. And like we said, it's not that like, oh, I love myself. It's really a process. And I love the word you just used was respect. Respecting yourself. And I have a couple things real quick to talk about with that is respect. So when a child does something wrong, if the parent looks the other way, sorry, I actually looked the other way and got away from my microphone. If the parent looks the other way and doesn't really teach the lesson that needs to be taught in that moment to the child, then that parent really doesn't love the child. And it's almost that paradox that I like to talk about of being too good is to be no good. If you're too good to your child and you're just providing them everything, they don't know how to do anything on their own. And that's not true self-love. That's self-love with strings attached, because you're giving this child so much because you want it to accept you, which probably means the parent doesn't love themselves really. So think about how I've been relating this child and parent to yourself and your ego, and to be able to love who you truly are instead of being this egotistical monster. So respect is when you need to learn the lesson, you got to teach yourself the lesson. If not, then you're going to be like the parent that looks the other way. The child keeps making the same mistake, and it just follows him throughout his life. So I think that's one powerful thing about respect. And then the second powerful thing about respect is what I do with myself. And this is going to sound a little goofy, but you got to be a little goofy if you love yourself at this level. What I do is if I if I notice a few days that I'm just lethargic, or I'm not really, I'm unhappy with the way that I'm behaving. Maybe I'm not putting the amount of work that I want to put in, or whatever it is. I kind of punish myself like a parent will punish their child. And what I'll say is,
Oh,
oh, well, you wanted to act like that for the past couple of days. Well, now you have to go on a 4-hour bike ride. So I'll put myself through the ringer and do something crazy and put myself into a punishment, which is good, because what happens is it teaches yourself a lesson. You're able to take yourself serious, but then you also can make that switch, because the energy switch, if you do something like a 4-hour bike ride, it'll change your whole mindset. And if you need that little bit of a shakeup to get you back to your rhythm, it's a powerful thing. So if anyone out there wants to start punishing themselves, there's a nice little self-love lesson, because love is tough. Just like they say, it's tough love.
yeah. You're suggesting again. Just we mentioned this. You're 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 suggesting people to be hard on themselves. Anyway, anyway. So there's one thing about the self-respect thing. I believe self-respect somehow it uh, puts forward the concept of empathy as well. Because I respect myself. I got a setback. I was into a negative situation. I was unresourceful, and maybe it hit me for like a day, or a month, or a week, or for a year, 5 years, 10 years, or whatsoever. And I know that process, it hit me hard. It changed my personality negatively. It has a
Mm,
bad impact on me. So since I love myself, I respect myself with all the issues I have, with all the weaknesses I have. I embrace my vulnerabilities. And when I got out of that situation,
mm,
and I found someone else in that situation, I become empathetic,
mm,
because I respected myself in those dark moments, in those negative times.
mm.
And when I'm out of those situations, I'll be respecting others people like anyone. And that's the truest example of empathy. That you understand what's happening, and you put yourself again, you put yourself in the other person's shoe, and you realize, hey, if this person is depicting some behavior, that could be one of the reasons. And since you have actually not exactly to the same negative thing, but you were in some dark moments or some negative situations, you can relate to it.
Yeah.
And since you respected yourself, you respect the other person's opinion, the other person's personality, and that actually helps us in building relationships as well, for sure.
Mm. Yeah, because earlier you did say something about like how is it not narcissistic if you're loving yourself, and that's it right there. Because if you can love yourself, that means you're accepting your darkness, and we're talking about not ego love, we're talking about true self love. If you can truly love yourself, and this kind of plays into what we are talking about with the narcissism. If you truly love yourself, then that means you're not looking for others to provide that love because you're able to give it to yourself. And I think that's one of the most powerful things about self love is that you aren't putting an unfair burden on your partner, on your family, on your friends to provide you something because you couldn't do it yourself. Because when you could do it yourself, then you're not asking this unfair burden for others to give you that love that you couldn't provide to yourself. And the same thing with acceptance. You know, if you can't accept yourself, then you're not going to be able to accept when others make mistakes. But if you could start accepting your darkness, like you just said, you know, oh, you know, I used to do that in the past. So I could see how this person just did this situation, even if it's not the same, you know. And then you think of the Nazis. They weren't all born as children that were evil. You know, they were all born just like you and I. And what happens is life takes you on its course. And if you're not aware and you're not getting to that self discovery and you're not really conscious of your unconscious, you could become a Nazi. And that's a scary thing to think about, truly.
Exactly, exactly. And there was one of the things that actually popped in my mind. It was more about, the self-love thing. That what happens usually is that people, I guess I'm skipping that. We'll just skip that.
Ah,
Talking about, it popped out in my mind and it's, it's suddenly goes
it
away. And, a- Anyways, so we'll be talking about some coaching thing. You know, we talked about self-love, and no, here it comes. Here it comes. So it was
yeah.
about it was about acceptance, more acceptance, higher acceptance with least or near to zero expectations. That's the lethal plan. You accept yourself and you are expecting nothing from people because
Yes.
you are here for your own self. I talked about this recently in one of the podcasts, because it's you, you know yourself.
Yeah.
Again, since we started from self-awareness thing, self-discovery thing, and then we moved on to the self-love thing. So since you're self-aware, you have discovered your own self. You know yourself, Like if I'm talking about you, Joseph knew herself himself. That's why he started this thing. He came to the podcast by his own choice. Nobody was like, "Hey, Joseph, gonna do that." There was no one. Joseph opted for podcasting by his
Mm.
own self. It was his own choice. So if no one is gonna give the feedback, or if people are gonna criticize, if Joseph is happy and he's like, "Hey, I'm doing good, and I'm contributing positively to the society,"
Yeah.
then Joseph will need not a single person in this entire world to appreciate. But hey, I like your podcast. I actually have listened. It's awesome work you're doing. Anyway, so
No,
I, I
100%.
see
You're
I,
right with that. Yeah.
I see this perspective. That's the extreme of self love, because you since you've embraced yourself with all the positive and the negatives, you can't
Yes.
expect anyone else, to be there for you. To even you don't want criticism based since you know yourself.
Hmm.
If I know this thing is my strength, and the other person is criticizing me on this one of my skills, I'm gonna skip that criticism. Man, you don't know me. I know myself. And what you're thinking is my weakness, I ultimately know it's my strength.
Yes. Yeah, that's so powerful. And
That's power.
it's like nutritionists or dietitianists when they try to give someone a diet, they don't know what their body's going to accept or deny. We're all so unique. And the same thing for the mind. You know, I can give you a program, but I really don't know if it's going to work for you. Only you know it's going to work. And until science gets to the point where we can get to our emotions and start putting labels and values on what different emotions mean in the brain, like we're not there yet. So everything's invisible. So that means that only you know you. So only you can fix you. I mean, that's it.
True,
It's good
true.
to have a coach, to have someone guide you along. And what I like to tell my clients is I'm a tour guide, but I don't have a destination for you to go. You have the destination. I'll provide, a little wiggle room here and there. We'll do a few exercises, but truly you have to believe that you have the power. And once you get the taste of your own power, which you have and which I have, it's addicting to be able to really work on yourself and to continue to grow into this amazing being and really discover who you truly are and what you're truly here to do.
Yeah, and that was actually my last point. I gotta closer to this about coaching thing.
Listen,
So
I'm a
you
podcast
know,
host. I was trying to make it easy for you.
I know that. I know. I know. I exactly know where it's coming from.
I love
You're just switching your role. Otherwise, you're also a host.
uh,
Anyways,
mm,
so what do you think? What's the role of a coach?
mm.
About discovering or helping someone to find themselves.
Yeah, the way I see a coach is really providing the right tools to be able to get somebody to take themselves serious, to get somebody to really learn about who they are, to get somebody to accept who they are, to get someone to become confident in who they are, to get somebody to be able to love who they are. Like we said, the positive and negative, that's so important because if you're only going to love the positive about yourself, that's just ego love. And then to get somebody to actualize themselves, to really be able to express who they are and really take the purpose that they're made to do and go do it into the world. And a lot of people, with the law of attraction, a lot of people get stuck in not creating that action. And what a coach does is it really pushes you to do the action. It's good to visualize, it's good to know what you want, but then you have to do the actions. And a coach kind of checks up on you. It keeps you on the path that you want to go. And he's not there or she's not there to tell you what to do, but it's more or less to kind of keep you on your path and give you a little scoot or a boot here and there to keep your aim where you want to aim life. So that's what I see a coach in. Everyone's different, but the one thing I do want to say is with coaches, if you're ever interested in getting a life coach, make sure that they've done the work or they're doing the work with themselves. Because what a lot of coaches do is they'll read great books, they'll do all this amazing stuff, but they're not actually living what they're preaching. And for me, you don't want to work with somebody that hasn't lived it because they truly don't understand the process of growth if they haven't lived it. So with a coach, you want someone that's authentically done what they're talking about and someone that's not telling you what to do. They're more or less guiding you into the direction that you choose.
Exactly. And I believe it's more about, coach is there for you to connect the dots. Puzzle is yours, it's all yours. It's all messed up, it's jumbled, And what coach does is it helps you connect the dots.
Yeah.
Ultimately you're the one who gonna connect those and find the picture of that. You know, but it's all you who's gonna do that. And one more thing about this that what coaches usually does is that again you mentioned that just giving advices and just showing the positive side of everything, that's not actually honest professional work. To be very honest, it's not true that you have to show the very positive things to your client. Rather, you gotta show them, hey, you're bad at this thing. You're showing negative behavior at this thing, and these are some common behaviors that are actually rude. That shouldn't be, best for your personality, and you gotta change that. And that's how I believe, the coaches got some very important role, to transforming lives of people, playing a positive part, and ultimately creating, uh, transform and well-developed society.
Mm. Mm. I love the way you just said that. And yeah, like coaches, they got to be tough with you. And that's the thing with me, at least. Like I vet everybody that I'm going to work with and I make sure that they're a good fit for me, not only that I'm a good fit for them. And if I notice that they're not going to commit to this or they're going to be a little bit soft or they're not sure if they want to do this, then I don't put the time in, and I tell them like they'll have to find another coach because I want to work with somebody that's ready to put the time in and is okay with me saying something that's like a little bit harsh or a little bit dark. Like, hey, I'm noticing that you keep saying this or you keep doing this, and we got to get through this because your goal is X and you're not going to reach it if you keep talking about Y. So yeah, it's a tough balance to find the right clients, but you if you want to make change, you really you gotta take it serious. Like we said,
True
it's not
that. True
butterflies
that.
and fairy tales.
Exactly. One more thing, regarding this coaching thing, specifically, it's not related to coaching, but for me, it's more about, general piece of advising or some mentoring related things. What I believe that we mentioned, every person is unique. And with being every person so unique, the person is again resourceful. So what happens is, if a person comes to me and he or she asks a question that, hey, I got this issue. And so for what I see in mentorship or in coaching, it's more about you don't give them the solution, you don't answer them. They ask you one question, you ask them five more questions, you ask them 10 questions about
Love it.
their own self. They can answer. They start the first from the first one. They're gonna answer the person about their own self. Then the second one, the third one. As many as you ask, as many they're going to respond. Ultimately, you ask them the question. They were resourceful enough. They were unique enough that they answered their own situation, and you didn't even provide the answer.
Yes.
I, I,
Yes.
I see it. I see it this way. You don't have to answer them at all. They ask you a question. You ask them many questions in your life. They're gonna answer those. They got it. So here's the solution for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And they get to their own solution, right? Like they figure out
Exactly,
their own.
because it was inside. It was inside, right? Because if I'm curious about my some of the issue, it's somewhere that there was previously in me that but currently I lack that thing. So I actually know consciously and unconsciously that what could be the step that I could regain those things or that balance or some anything.
Mm.
So it's all in me. And if someone is gonna say, hey, you're gonna again, you mentioned about those tradition things. So like if my tradition is gonna give me a plan, definitely I'm gonna follow, and
Mm.
maybe it helps me for sure. But if I'm, if they ask me what's your favorite food, so they know, the group that I actually have to follow to, gain some good health. And from that, they ask me, hey, which fruit or which nuts or which herbs do you like from this group? So I know myself, and I'll be like, hey, I want this herb, but not this one. So again, I'm doing dieting, I'm having a plan for myself. But I'm again, since I know myself, I opted the best one for me because
Mm.
it suits me. And
Yeah.
I believe that's it.
Yeah, like
That's how it is.
if they ask you, it's like, how did you do it? You could tell them, and it's the truth, but it's your subjective truth because, like we talked about with the diet, like that's your body, that's your mind. So there's a certain signature that only works for you, and you could tell them it, but it's as subjective as saying that that a sports team's going to win tomorrow in the game. You don't know if it's going to work for them or not. You have no idea because you're not them. You don't know their issues. You don't know how their brain works. You don't know exactly how they're wired, how their energy's flowing. So I love what you just
Exactly.
said. And that's why earlier, like I said, coaches really have to go through the work on their own because then you learn like, oh, everything was within me. I didn't need much else. So if I'm going to be a coach for someone else, I don't need to provide too much. And it lowers the burden of what you are as a coach because a lot of early coaches they come out and they want to help people. I was the same way. They want to be the savior in everyone's life and they put so much pressure on themselves to try to figure people out when it becomes like you just said almost like just questioning and listening. And that's the thing about coaches that I want to talk about real quick is being able to really listen because you said no one's really listening anymore. And that's why it's so powerful to have a coach is because they're not just listening, they're actively listening. And what that means is they're listening to the stories, they're listening to keywords, they're listening also to your tone. They're listening to the energy shifts. So they'll notice if you say something, if there's a little bit of resistance, or if there's something you say that you really enjoy, you could just hear it in the tone and the energy. So, that kind of listening is powerful because like we said, it's easy to do the work and think that you could do it yourself because we all have it within us, but you really don't notice some of these little subtleties that a coach may notice, and like you said, they kind of connect the dots for you. So that's another powerful thing that a coach will provide is that space to be able to really listen to you and hear your energies and hear your tones and really get a good sense of who you are just by your speech.
Exactly. So far it's very comprehensive, but pretty awesome discussion, and
Yeah.
I appreciate your time again.
Yeah.
It's pleasure having you. It's pleasure having you, and I actually enjoy it. I'm really enjoying this
Me too.
conversation a lot.
And if anyone's listening and saying, wow, this is really good stuff, we're going to have another podcast coming up in the future and we'll switch roles and you'll hear more of your side, which is exciting.
For for sure. Looking forward to be your guest. Awesome. So far so good. Any last words from your side? On self love, self care, self respect, anything you want to summarize this?
What I want to say is with self-love, this is the last thing. And I know we've talked a lot about self-love and, it's really that loving both the positive and negative, and it's not what you think it is. It's more than just self-care. With self-love, it's really tough to actually love yourself in that sense without the self-knowledge, the self-acceptance and self-esteem. Because if you're not confident in who you are and you're not accepting who you are and you're not knowledgeable about who you are, then it's really tough to love something if you don't know who it is. So I like to tell people there is almost like a process to go through to get to the point of self-love. It starts with knowledge and then it goes to acceptance and then it's confidence. And then once you're confident in front of people and you could really express who you are, then you could love it because now you could see it, now you could taste it, now you know who it is. So I guess to leave on a final note, with self-love is don't think today you could just go right into it. Do the process. Think about self-knowledge and learn about yourself, become curious about yourself, and then put yourself through the ringer, go through acceptance, get confident in who you are, and then you can love yourself. It's a process. So yeah, I think that's it. It's been a wonderful conversation. It's amazing to see the work that you're doing, especially, over there in Pakistan. I've never met anyone from the Middle East. So this is a first for me. And, I'm just so grateful for this opportunity. It's really a blessing to
Appreciate
meet you, and it's a blessing
appreciate
to
it.
be here.
Appreciate
Yeah. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I highly appreciate your time. Those insights you have just shared. I believe it's a very good learning for sure. Everyone who's listening and who's watching this podcast, definitely, he or she is gonna, have if we apply some of the checks and ultimately, it's gonna benefit, very positively. On
Beautiful.
that note, thank you so much for your time once again, and I appreciate, for having you again on some amazing, exciting topic. And I believe that's it for today. And I say you all a very good bye bye.
I love it. Bye bye.